Welcome to the Today Counts show. Today does count because it impacts, it influences your tomorrow and the day after that and the day after that. The Today Counts podcast is sponsored by the generous donors of the Lead Today community. I'm your host, Kim Piper. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Today Counts show. I have with me somebody who is multi-gifted, multi-talented. He's a successful business owner. He has an interesting spiritual journey that I hope we will get to talk about. And I also hope that we'll get to talk about leadership. And I'm sure we will. Kyle Duford. Kyle, did I say that right? Kyle Duford?
Yeah, that was
okay,
perfect.
Good. Awesome. Well, hey, welcome to the show, Kyle.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Thanks for having me. This is going to be a fun conversation.
Yeah. Well, let's start by, introducing you to our listening audience. You are a business owner. Tell us about your business first.
Well, actually, I want to correct you, and I'm sorry I didn't earlier. I'm not the business owner here. I'm the president and the executive creative director. Maybe one day I will be. That's the arrangement one day. But I got to give credit where credit is due. I have a wonderful.
That's right.
Wonderful. We kind of act as co-partners. But yeah, he is the founder. His name is Jeff. He's a great Christian man, and I'm able to do all I can do because of him and his trust in me. So I got to give credit where credit is due. But go ahead. Didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah. So what's the name of your company and what do you guys do and what's your size and tell us about that and maybe even how you got involved.
Yeah, this is a fun story. So the company is the Brand Leader. We're out of Greenville, South Carolina. That's where I am right now in the main office. We have an office in Midtown Manhattan. We also have some folks out in California. We've got a couple of writers in Colorado. What we are is we're basically a branding strategy and advertising firm. And we hang our hat on being some of the best creatives you'll see. We do exceptional work. And I'm proud to say that because I'm not the one doing the work, so I can exalt my team. They're fantastic. Basically, we work on naming, branding companies, building a brand's worth and legitimacy and value in the eyes of their customer or soon-to-be customer. We do a lot of campaigns and advertising work, commercials, things like that. So, I love it. How I came to be was that gentleman I was just referring to. Mm-hmm. Just a crazy, bizarre story, but the long and the short of it is he wanted to retire one day. He's just a few years older than I am, but he was looking down the road and he's like, I don't know if I want to do this forever. I could sell it, but I'm not sure what I want to do. You should own an agency. And I'm like, why? He's like, you'd be great at owning an agency. I'm like, okay, I don't hear an offer here. Like, what's happening? And he's like, why don't you come work for me and with me?
It's a compliment, but it's not an offer, right?
Right, exactly. And there's more to the story. And he said, why don't you buy the company for me one day? But now I hire you, and in the middle we just make magic together. And I remember those words very distinctively. I'm like, make magic together. That sounds great. Oh. I was brand side for a number of years. I was at Dr. Martens for 3 years. I was at Nike for a hot minute. I was at a couple smaller companies, Keen Footwear, a lot of outdoor brands, and some others. And so I was like, it's a chance to do what I love, but on the agency side, so I can help a lot of different brands, not just one. And I leapt at the chance, and it's been almost 5 years now. And since then, we grew from 5-6 full-time people to almost 40. We've quintupled in revenue and size, and now we have footprint nationally and internationally. So I'm incredibly blessed to be able to do this, but I'm also honored that he kind of handpicked me to say, here's my Lamborghini, go take it for a ride, and I don't need to be in the passenger seat. Not many people would do that. So. Yeah.
It's a pretty competitive business, isn't it? It's not. I know that I get shopped, if you will. I don't know, 15, 20 times a week on LinkedIn, on email, or whatever for similar type of companies that are making their pitch, towards me. So it's pretty competitive. Why do you think you guys are doing so well?
Well, like I said a second ago, the team here is remarkable. So we're what you call a full service agency, where we do everything you can imagine for marketing, communications, design, whatnot. So we have teams of copywriters, designers, developers, digital folks who run paid media, email, things like that. We have a full public relations team, they're fantastic. We have a social media team. We have photo and video. So we get a chance to showcase our ability across a whole bunch of different industries, across all of our disciplines. And it sounds cliche, but the work does speak for itself. So, if you go to our website, thebrandleader.com, and you see anything that you like, it's all original stuff that we've created or concepted and made ourselves for our clients. And it's really, it's kind of like you have to back it up, right? So I get those calls all the time too, those LinkedIn pitches and everything. And it's a little maddening being the president of a branding agency when everyone today wants to be a brand, thinks they're a brander. And look,
Right.
good for you. If you do it well, good for you. I don't care how many there are. It just makes the world a better place. But which is silly. It doesn't make the world a better place, but you get what I mean.
Yeah.
But I just want people to do it right. There's so many definitions of a brand. There's so many people don't call things the same thing, and so it's disruptive to organizations that are really trying to improve their connection with their customers, and that's really what a brand should be and is. It's an emotional connection. So we just lean on that real hard.
Yeah, so let's get down a little bit to the nitty gritty, just on understanding how it works. I know that in my experience, when I have hired a marketing firm, I'll call it a marketing firm, uh, they would consult us as to what our brand is saying, what it's not saying, whether it's consistent, whether it's this or that, and win us over to understanding the concepts and the theories and the strategies. And then either they would coach, if you will, our team, or we would contract with them for them to do the actual work, or there was a combination thereof.
Mhm.
Is that in the neighborhood of what you folks do?
Yeah, absolutely right. There's many different ways we can engage with a client. I I like, to be honest, any aspect of it because I just love seeing. I kind of have the trail, the leave no trace methodology, like find a trail better than you found, leave it better than you found it. And so I love working with customers and clients of ours because however long our engagement is, and hopefully it's for a long time, but however long it might be, I want to walk away from that engagement leaving the company better than we found it. And so it doesn't matter to us, but I personally, I run the brand team. Besides running the day to day here, that's really what I get off on, and I absolutely love the process. It's really just kind of understanding who the business is. And you mentioned a couple different things there. So there's marketing, there's advertising, there's branding, and people get those things commingled. And really, someone mentioned this to me years ago, and it's always kind of stuck with me that if you're opening up a restaurant, the branding is the secret sauce. It's what your chefs are dressed in. It's how you're greeted at the door. It's the paint colors. It's the logo on the sign. It's how you talk to people. It's how the menus are made. Like all those intangible things that make. David Ogilvy said, one of the fathers of advertising said, a brand is the intangible sum of all of its parts. And so that's branding, right? And then there's advertising, which is putting up a billboard saying, "Hey, come to my restaurant," or putting up a digital ad saying, "Come to my restaurant," or a social media ad. And then the marketing is kind of how you're actually the strategy and everything, how to drive people in. So the advertising is the piece, the marketing is the effort, really. So people commingle that all the time, and it's fine if you do so in a meaningful way. But for the most part, you're right. We can engage on many different levels.
Yeah. So let me see if because you already said early on that we get some of these terms mixed up. When I heard you describe brand, it almost sounds to me from a leadership perspective, brand is not too far away from culture. Maybe I'm wrong about that. I want you to speak into that because I do believe that culture is created by design or default, and so
Mm-hmm.
there's an effort that goes into that culture. Maybe we can talk about that. Advertising, if I understood you used the word piece, could also maybe be a tool, different tools. Like you
Yep.
said, a billboard is a tool, an email
Yep.
is a tool, that kind
Yep.
of a thing. And then marketing is the effort, or maybe even the playbook, the strategy
Yeah,
of
that's exactly right.
putting all those things together. But is brand similar to culture, or are those two different things?
I think, and this is just my opinion, and there could be many different opinions that might be more educated than me, but for me, I think culture is part of brand. So if you
Okay.
let's look at Warby Parker. For you're wearing glasses, I've got my readers right here. I love Warby
Yeah.
Parker. They're a digitally native vertical brand, 12, 13 years ago, revolutionized how we purchase and buy, how they make eyewear. And now they have brick and mortar shops, so they're not just digitally, native anymore. They have other places. But one of the things that they pride themselves on is their culture internally. They have an internal culture playbook. They know how they speak to one another internally, what it means to work there, what it means to welcome customers into your brick and mortar stores. Zappos has the same thing. REI has the same thing. That's not who they are. That's a part of what it is to work there. That's a part of their business. But when you think about them, now you might think of like, Zappos shoes, where Tony Hsieh, the late founder of Zappos, even once said that, we're in the business of delivering happiness. We just happen to sell shoes, which is,
Okay.
and he's, revered as somebody who changed internal culture for the better, customer service and so forth. But that became part of the brand. But the brand is also world's largest online shoe, e-commerce store. And it's so many other things. It's, fast customer service. And so culture can be a big part of your brand. But like I mentioned earlier, Ogilvy would say that's one of the many intangibles. You can't really touch a brand. You can't really smell a brand. You can't hear it. You definitely can't hold it. But when it comes together, it's that feeling that you get, I'm going to give you a quick example. And I love this example. So you don't have to close your eyes. But if I told you to close your eyes and think about Nike, the business, and I said, they just made an announcement this morning. Maybe you didn't hear it. They announced they're going to have a new airline. It's called Nike Air, which makes sense.
I did not.
Funny. No, that's
Okay.
it's not true.
Yeah, no,
I'm
no.
just saying, yeah. So,
that seems a little bit out of their lane, but okay.
right. Let's just imagine for the sake of the analogy here. So if I said, imagine what your ticket would look like. Imagine what the plane looks like. Imagine what the flight attendants are wearing. What are they showing on the television sets? What are you eating on the plane? What music is playing? You could probably, picture something in your head, and orange is probably in the mix someplace. There's going to be a swoosh probably on the tail of the plane.
Sure.
The ticket's probably going to be digital and look really cool and in the Nike font maybe. Obviously, flight attendants are going to be wearing Nike sneakers, and they're going to be wearing Lycra or something quick wicking. ESPN or SportsCenter is going to be on the television. You're going to be eating a healthy meal, right?
Intentionally diverse. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it's going to be aspirational. It's going to be like, everything's going to be the fact that you could come up with that and picture that idea with millions of other people. That's a brand in my mind, right? It's, what they're going to do before they're going to do it, because it's the feeling you get when you think about Nike. Now, whether you wear Nikes or not, it's one of those feelings you get, you understand it. When you get to that level, and look, Nike's been perfecting this for years. I mean, it's amazing. It's what you think about of Amazon. You think about, hey, I need something. I'm going to go to Amazon. It'll be here tomorrow or the next day. You can go on and on and on and on. Starbucks, you might not like how they call out your name or write your name on the cup, but you're going to get the exact same cup of coffee here or in Dubai or in London. It doesn't matter. There's these signals that you send to your customer, this red thread through everything you do. And it goes from the logo, the name, the aprons on the Starbucks employees, the fake ticket I talked about with Nike, but it also goes through your culture. So it's one of the many points that makes up who you are. So if you went to Nike's offices, and they're beautiful out in Beaverton, Oregon. I used to live in Portland. I'd be out there quite a bit. And well, I worked there for a while. But one of the great things about that place is massive images of athletes, this aspirational thing, and they're all in motion. It's someone taking a swing at a bat. It's somebody running. It's Tiger taking a swing at a golf club. It's, at the time, years ago, it was Lance Armstrong on his bike. Everyone was doing something. Jordan midair. It's aspirational. You can feel it. If you looked around and saw slovenly people at the Nike offices who didn't give a rip about health or food, you'd be like, I'm in the wrong place. That's my point. Yeah. So it's part of the brand. It's not the brand itself.
That's great. That brings me to this question. So you have a client in front of you, a prospective client, or maybe you're even a little farther along in that, and they're trying to describe to you their brand. But as you look around, you don't see what's being described aligned with what you're experiencing. In other words, there seems to be a lack of, maybe integrity is too harsh of a word
Sure.
to your point about Nike, because Nike's been perfecting this for how long, right? It's been a long time. So integrity might be too harsh of a word, but how do you help a customer see themselves the way everybody else sees them when they see themselves differently?
That's a very powerful question, and very loaded as well. Sometimes you just have to go ask the customer, right? And you ask,
Yeah.
why did you choose them or why did you not choose them? We
Mm.
always do a competitive analysis and we look at businesses, to businesses that are either adjacent to them or in their same endemic. And we ask the question, why would you choose them over this particular client we're working with? And the answers are astonishing. And it's really hard for a CEO, especially a startup CEO, a founder led company, to hear that. And so, I mean, but you're paying me to tell you that. So I'll be the one in the room who will tell you. I've been in a number of situations where we do a brand workshop with our clients if they take the full brand package. And we also do one-on-one interviews with key stakeholders in the business. So while we'll interview the CEO by himself or the president, whomever, we might also interview the head of customer service or the person in the warehouse. Doesn't matter. People who are key stakeholders into this brand process. So many times this has happened where they'll tell me things and they'll say, don't tell him or her, the CEO or owner, that I said this. But, and they'll have
Right.
6 or 7 people on the leadership team tell me the same thing. So I get the privilege of saying in a group, hey, here's what I've been hearing. And it's not one particular person. And this might be hard for you to hear, but this is the sentiment inside of your building. And I might read a couple of things, key insights that we found. Now let's look at your customers and what they think. How would they know who you are if your internal team doesn't know who you are? How would a competitor really kind of use this against you, right? How would you define yourself against a competitor who has been in business longer and definitely knows who they are? So those are the hard conversations to have, but it proves to be very, very rewarding. And I'm a little ballsy, so I'm happy to have that face-to-face conversation, with the head of an organization and be like, this is a little disconcerting for me. And you might not like it and you might not want to work with us anymore, but this is what we're seeing. And it's our recommendation that fix X, Y, and Z. Sometimes though, that's not even a question. Sometimes it's like they know what they're doing. They just don't know how to hit the gas and let people know who they are. So there's a great guy. There's a great brander, designer extraordinaire. His name is Chris Do, D-O. He ran his agency, an agency much like ours, but out in LA. And he and I were talking one day and he said, look, it's really simple. A lot of companies these days, while we say a brand is, all the things you have to figure out in your strategy, your mission, vision, values, all these things. He goes, really what it is understand who they are, understand who your audience is, and then just figure out how to talk to your audience based on who you are. And that's really the nuts and bolts of it. And so when you boil it down to that, it really makes a lot of sense. If you take the Nike example, if there were cookies on the plane when you showed up on the plane, you'd be like, what the hell? This is weird, right? Nike doesn't serve cookies. Well, how do you know? They've never had an airline before. They've not been in their cafeteria. Well, but Nike doesn't serve cookies. You do feel it. And so sometimes it's that easy to just say, hey, we're not going to talk to our customers that way because it doesn't feel right. And if you can quantify
Yeah.
it with who you are, then it's even easier to get across the line.
Yeah. You might have a more of a power drink or a protein drink you would expect, or a power bar. That's what I was trying to
Exactly.
think of.
Power Bar, one of
Is
our
what you'd be
clients.
thinking about. Yeah. So in my work and in my ministry, Kyle, I think I probably work more in the realm of reputation.
Mm-hmm.
That a lot of times the executives and the owners don't really even know their reputation, and sometimes I have to share with them what their reputation is, because somehow that doesn't get to them. And sometimes it doesn't get to them because they're not listening. And other times it doesn't get to them for cultural reasons. But, listening to you talk about the brand, it sounds like reputation um, it could be an aspect inside of brand.
Absolutely.
Is Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay.
You could have the best
So
product in the world. You could have the best customer service in the world. You could have all these great things. The product is shiny and beautiful and whatever. But if every time there's a problem with the product, you send it back, they don't answer you, and everyone knows it,
yeah.
then your reputation destroys your brand, right? So yeah, absolutely right. And there's probably millions of little micro points that make up a brand. But absolutely reputation is one. It's what you hear about
Yeah.
them when you're not around, right?
Yeah. I can think of a uh, I think a pretty good example. It might be a little bit sideways, but a pretty good example. Take Amazon for example. They have grown so big that if they have any challenges, one challenge I think that they have is they themselves are doing business with some companies that really don't align with their own values and business model. And so we as consumers, we really, when we're doing business inside of Amazon, we we have been taught by Amazon that you're dealing with Amazon.
Right.
But often, you more often now you have to pay attention to who you're dealing with inside of the Amazon platform,
Mhm.
because it's not always Amazon.
Right.
And I think Amazon has to be careful about that, because if you walk away with a bad transaction, you have a bad taste in your mouth. And yes, it's ABC company. You learn the hard way that no, you didn't deal with Amazon. You dealt with ABC company. But then again, you walk away and you're not so confident about Amazon either, because they invited you into their house. So you went into their house, you did business in their house. And I wonder what kind of conversations Amazon's having, because I know for a fact that there's two different kinds of businesses going on. There's Amazon, and there's those that are in the house of Amazon, and they don't play by the same rules. And they might have contracts between the two of them, but I don't think those have fleshed out in a way that is consistent. It's amazing to me how you can build a brand, but how you can begin destroying your brand through the side door, the back door, and not even realize it.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, there's so many different ways you can buy on Amazon. Amazon has their own products that they sell on Amazon. Amazon will sell third-party products that they've purchased at a wholesale rate and then sold through Amazon. It's all them, like a
Yeah.
wholesaler would.
Yeah.
But then there's something called fulfilled by Amazon, which is I want to sell I want to sell my coffee mug here, and so I send them my inventory, and then they fulfill it for me, so it can be Prime and all that sort of thing, and I get a cut of it. Or you can just have it be like a marketplace, which is really the one that you're talking about, which is anyone can be on there selling their product, and it's probably not going to be Prime, and they just get a notice that says, "Hey, somebody just ordered this through Amazon. Amazon taking a cut." It's on them to send it to you. It's not going to come in Amazon packaging. It's going to come from them. I've made that mistake. We all have. It comes from China. It comes 3 weeks late, But
Or
I
never.
think their responsibility, or that's true. You're right. But their
Yeah.
responsibility is, and this has happened to us, Amazon will say, we'll make it right. And they refund it no matter what. They don't even ask to see proof that it didn't come, right? They're just, but you're absolutely right. That can be a very damaging thing. Now, someone at some level, whether it's Bezos or below, is saying, does that outweigh the positivity of people knowing that in some cities you can order it and get an hour later? In some cities it's going to be Prime in 2 days. Does that outweigh those sometimes tangential obstacles outweigh what people think about? And then do we need to do any kind of damage control? Those are the conversations that are probably happening.
Well, as a key leader, if not the key leader of the brand leader, and your 40 employees, you might have 38 that are aligned and right on the money, and you may not know that you have two that are not, because sometimes it takes a while for it to flesh out,
Mm-hmm.
and that can be a brand destroyer. Or again, that's maybe an exaggerated term, but it can depreciate the value of your brand. And so employees is another way that a brand can be depreciated or decayed, or reduced in value, whatever phrase, that you want. And those of us in leadership, if we've learned anything, we've learned that hiring is a big deal. Onboarding is a bigger deal than we want to believe. Reinforcing who we are, keeping short-term accounts. These are all, really difficult things. And most of us learned this the hard way. At least I'll raise my hand and say, I ran into leadership just doing and not really thinking about the ramifications of what hiring is. And even Peter Drucker, who's no longer with us, but the management guru worldwide, said something to the extent that if our hiring processes are excellent, we still only have a 33% chance of hitting it out of the park. That's a very humbling number. And then he broke out the other 33% as a no harm, no foul, but the other 33% is an absolute train wreck. So you put all these systems into place, and you still have a 33% chance of inviting somebody in who takes you a step back. That's crazy. Um, Kyle, I want to talk to you about leadership if I can.
Sure.
You're an experienced leader, and on the Today Count show is produced by the Lead Today community. It's a product of the Lead Today community, and as I told you before we hit record, we are still learning how to serve our listening audience. But I think one of the differentiators is that we bring on experts in this field and that field, but as much as we can, we want to know the human behind the expertise,
Sure.
and because one of our differentiators at Lead Today is we are very one-on-one. We're very organic, incarnate, in the way that we go, about things. We don't just have here's our 5-point plan, do this, and your life will be different. It's
Sure.
messier than that, right? It's it's
Well,
it's
life
it's
is messy,
messy.
isn't it? Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And leadership is messy, life is messy. Um, when it comes to, you wrote a book called Twice Found, and it is a book really about a second chance that you received in life, and
Hmm.
and maybe you can kind of weave this in together. But if you were speaking, you said that you've done some speaking at different colleges and whatnot. So when you're speaking to a an emerging leader, you're speaking to an emerging generation.
Hmm.
They have a desire to get into a chair. They have a desire to make a difference. They have a desire to lead. What are the things that you have learned in your own life in the sense of leading yourself and leading others? What is it that you tend to share? I mean, you have quite a story anyway. I know that's a wide
A
open
big
question.
question. Yeah. A wide open
It's a
question.
big, yeah, it's a big question. But
Yeah.
where do
I
you
would.
start? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Where do we start on that? I would say though that you just made a comment there that how do I lead myself? I don't lead myself. Um,
Mm,
my wife leads me. The Lord leads me.
mm,
Jeff, the business owner, helps lead me. My colleagues lead me. I made the mistake of trying to lead myself for a good part of my life for 45 years. And it doesn't work well, because if you're not filling the cup up, you have nothing to give. And so I wasn't seeking anyone filling up my cup. And yet I kept thinking I had things to give. And it's kind of a sham. It was kind of a fraud. Um, so when I speak, I'll hit the second part of the question first. And that is when I speak to organizations as leadership groups or people that are or businesses that are hiring the younger generation, or when I'm speaking at a college for younger folks who are seeking employment at those businesses, the message is the same. It's just how I pivot it to the audience. I might say to the college kids, hey, when you're looking for a job, blah, blah, blah. And I'd say to the business, what they're looking for is blah, blah, blah. So
yeah.
it's a very similar message, but the message is simple. As leaders, we have to be adaptable, right? We have to be so adaptable. My dad was a boomer. He was an early boomer. He's no longer with us, but he was the tried and true, like you work your ass off. You have a secretary who stays with you for 30 years. You do everything the same way. You have, a 3-drink lunch. It was like Mad Men for him. That's kind of his life. But then they
That's
instill
yeah,
that
that's the good old boy years, right?
total good old boy years. And
Yeah,
he was an
yeah,
entrepreneur. He was a very successful one, but he lived it up, and he did it that way. And he didn't go to college,
yeah,
but a lot of people, the boomers, didn't go to college because of the war and things like that, and finances. But my mother did, my father didn't. But we were told we had to, and so not only did we had to go to college, but when you go to the office after college, you had to do a certain thing. You had to work your ass off. You had to do things a certain way. And I'm Gen X. When millennials came in, they started upending everything, and they started upending everything because of situations that happened in their life. They were tail end of the Iraqi war and things like that, and then the advent of technology changed how they thought, and then it really changed with Gen Z. And if you look at late millennials and Gen Z, and this is a lot of things I speak about, Gen Z in particular is the most depressed, most anxious, most medicated group of a generation ever in the history of the world. And
What
they're
age group is Gen Z? I forget.
Gen
Gen
Z is
Z.
25 and younger now. So we're just
Okay.
going in. I think the babies being born now are into a new generation. But basically, all the kids under 25. I've got 6 kids,
Yeah.
all in Gen Z. The youngest being 10, oldest being 23, and they're all still in that group.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
here's the crazy thing: they think they're so connected because they live in a hyper connected world. They grew up as the iPhone generation. They grew up with the internet. They grew up with YouTube. They grew up with all these things that they're obsessed with. I grew up with 3 channels on TV and Saturday morning cartoons. They didn't even know what the hell I'm talking about, right? They're like 3 channels, and you had to get up from the sofa and walk up to it. That's awful. And so but you know what that's like, right? But the point is that generation, they view things differently, and they think that they're connected, and in actuality they're not, because you can't be hyper connected with a true connection and then
Kyle,
also be
Kyle,
good.
the remote control was a breakthrough for me. So I didn't have to get off the couch. What? So just to
Yeah.
date myself a little bit.
Yeah. Oh, I remember that too. I think
Okay.
I
Okay.
had the corded version with the
Okay.
with the big button on it. It only went
Yeah.
up.
Yeah.
Now
Yeah.
I'm dating
That's good.
myself too. But so if you look at this generation, they've experienced 9/11, they've experienced everything since then. Snowden and the presidency debates and tons of things. And if you look at what they're most anxious about, because that's the very next question. Okay, if they're the most anxious generation in history, what are they anxious about? And this blows me away. And this is something we definitely didn't have to grow up with. 75% of them are most anxious about one single thing, and it drives me nuts. It is public school shootings, or public shootings, excuse me. They are,
Really?
whether it's school, whether it's at a grocery store, whether it's just out in the open, whether it's at a concert, the thing there, and I made the mistake of saying this at the last school I spoke at, and I said, that means there's 500 kids there. I said, that means 3 out of the 4 of you right now are hoping to God somebody doesn't walk through that door or that door and mow most of us down. And of course, that just made them more anxious. So that was my mistake. But I'm like, living in that fear is, I can never have imagined that. And my kids live in that fear, right? And so it's moving it back to culture and leadership. This group is coming. And right now, the only 5% or less of the workforce is Gen Z. But within 2 or 3 years from now, they're going to make up 20%. And then with millennials, makes up 60% in 2 or 3 years. So whether we want to or not, we have to adapt how we lead, because we can't just lead people strong arming them. We can't make them stay little six. They've gone through COVID. They've gone through, on and on and on and on and on. This poor generation needs us more than ever. And the ones to do it are the ones that are still in the workforce that are Gen X and older, who are leading them. And if we do it the way our parents told us to do it, we will fail them at every turn. So I look at leadership as being, you have to be adaptable. You have to be able to say, what do you need? What can I do for you? Now, it's a difference between, just like your children, you can't coddle them, but you also have to be there and listen to them, provide them a way that they can help themselves or get help with other people. For example, mental health struggles. They're, like I said earlier, they're the number 1 most medicated group of all time. I'm medicated. There's no shame for me. I suffer from depression and anxiety myself. And so I've been medicated. I'm a big proponent for men's mental health. I think it's very important to seek help and counseling. My wife is a therapist. And when I see people at my office who are struggling with those issues, it's like, I feel it's a requirement of me to help them and or their manager or their friends or their colleagues. If you don't help them, they will, they're not going to survive. And I mean that quite literally sometimes, because the second thing they're most worried about is suicide of themselves or their friends. It's just an enormous weight that they are carrying on themselves. And I don't believe God wants that for them. I don't believe this is in his plan. I think this is the result of a fallen world and the advent of technology, which is, while in many ways can convey his message across the world, in many ways can hurt his children. And it makes me sad, to be honest, especially because 6 of my children are firmly rooted in that generation. And many of them suffer from anxiety and depression themselves. So that's the big part we have to be concerned about. And For me, that's if you don't tackle that, if you don't tackle at least your point of view on how to handle this group of people, and it might not be this generation. It could be an older person. It could be somebody my age or Gen X, or it could be a late millennial, or sorry, an early millennial who also struggles. And we don't want to cast them aside in lieu of the younger kids, but whoever it is, it can't be like, hey, if you don't come back from lunch in 1 hour, you're fired. Those days are over. They're absolutely over. We don't work for Bell Labs or IBM in 1955. Now, there's some days we have to get work done, and we need to put a little bit of pressure on. We are a business after all. But if you're doing it at the expense of people, I can't subscribe to that. So it's a balance we have to do. It's a difficult one. So that was kind of your second part of the question, and I can answer the first one after I see you about to say something.
Well, you've said a lot, and
I usually do.
Well, as long as you can remember where you want to go after this, because I don't want to interrupt your stream of consciousness. I'm more commentating, maybe adding color, my color to what you're saying. I identify with the adaptable piece. My language is different, but I think we're speaking very similar ideas. I think we're expressing very similar ideas when I say that one of my fundamental beliefs about leadership is that it's always contextual. So for example, I remember in the old days, an interview question was often asked, and it's one that if I ever hear today, I do more than quince. I literally get sick and want to vomit, and that is, tell me about your leadership style. That was a normal question that was asked when I was hitting the ranks of leadership, and I don't hate everything about that question from a philosophical perspective, but from what it actually means is troublesome for me. You say adaptable, I say contextual. Sure. And I think that every context requires a different approach. And it has to do with the people that I'm dealing with, to your point. B, to the season that this place is in, or what they're what they're facing. And so you can't just simply write a book about leadership and call it done. And maybe that's why we just keep writing about it, because we keep learning. So I was more, agreeing with you. You brought a lot of sobriety to this question when you bring up, the Gen Zers, 25 and younger, because now you just threw my 7 grandkids, into that in that bowl, and then you're telling me about this public shootings. Now my daughter is an educator and a coach, and one of her students in Colorado was shot and killed in one of the shootings. My kids went to high school in Colorado. So when you talk about the Arapahoe Theater shooting, mm-hmm. We have a wrestler on our team, Alex, who was shot and killed in that theater. There was a shooting, and I'm forgetting the name of the high school, but there was another shooting there, and where my daughter took leadership in the community, and was trying to build emotional, spiritual support, for those. So whenever you, of course, Columbine. I mean, our church was a large church to begin with, but the Sunday after Columbine, there wasn't a seat available, in the auditorium, and it is so when you bring up that, it does bring up a sobriety to us, and it causes all of us to mourn, for not just those events, not just the fear and the anxiety that it has injected into our culture, but even from a theological perspective, the brokenness of mankind. The other thing I was going to say is that I want to encourage you to, because we still have a little bit of time. I want to encourage you to continue down this lane of thinking, because you've obviously given this some thoughts, and we haven't even touched on twice found yet. But I remember my first. So the generation before me, I'm a boomer. The generation before me, uh, um, they go by a couple different names, but one of them that I remember was Builder. They were the builders, and then we were the boomers. And the builders were very institutional, very
Hmm.
institutional. The boomers were kind of split into different ways, but were certainly more institutional than the Xers were. And my first collision in my reality of leadership was, I was surrounded by Xers who were part of my leadership teams in what I was doing. And I remember how much I felt disconnected, from them. I wrote down words like I sensed cynicism, from them. I sensed, I think the whole father wound thing kind of gave birth, around that time, if not
Yeah.
birth, certainly, growth. I was so unaware, of the psychological things that were beginning to happen, in our country. I did see though that they were also seemingly more creative in a lot of ways. They're thinkers out of the box. They questioned a lot of the um, tried and true doctrines of the faith that we never even questioned. And, so they brought good, debate in there, and they were certainly less institutional. Um, and then, the millennials. Now, my kids, my son, let's see, give or take, is 38. My daughter's 35. So I believe they're millennials, right?
Yep.
In,
Yep.
in that, in that group. And yeah, it's interesting. But anyway, so you're talking about adaptability. You're talking about managing people in the marketplace that looks different today than it did before. Keep going.
Yeah, well, I mean, I agree with everything you just said, and it was interesting because, and I don't have the stat in front of me, but in one of my talks, you can actually see what they asked what was important to, when looking for a new business, what was important to the four generations. It was the boomers, the Xers, the millennials, and the Zs. And the first two were remarkably similar. Again, we learned from our parents, right? More than anybody. So it was one of those deals where it was like, we did this, therefore you need to do the same thing. And
Yeah,
they mapped each other identically. The top three were, it was,
yeah,
again, I forget what it was. I apologize, but it was like stability in the business. It was the
mm,
longevity of your career there. It was things like that. Millennials
hmm,
came along. It was the first time you saw anything swap, and it moved their importance. They wanted to know sustainability practices of the business. They wanted to learn about their supply chain. They wanted to know if they had a give back program, charitable contributions. That was the first time there's any kind of switch in the modern workplace. And then Z came along, and all three switched up. It was, do you care about my mental health? Will I feel safe at work? Do you have a plan for me? Like, what are your benefits like? Because I need to be cared for. What's your work from home policy? Like, it completely flipped it on its head. And that's my point exactly, is like, if you're not prepared for that, the conversation at the interview question is not about what's your leadership style. The style is, hey, I mean, the question is, like, what are you looking for and how can we best suit you? Which is a very soft question to ask. But that's how
hmm,
you have to explain yourself. And look, I do a poor job at this. And I try to be a good dad. I'm probably not half the time. I try to be a good boss, probably not all the time, but it's a very, very tricky thing, especially when men like you and I have grown up in a generation where like it was expected of you to perform a certain way. It was just disrespectful if you didn't. When I was at Dr. Martin's, I had a young man come into my office. At the time, I was the senior global vice president, but I had an office in London and I had an office in Portland. I'm in my Portland office, and he was in customer service. And he just walked into my office one day and just started like kind of yelling at me, but kind of not. I was on the phone and I looked at him. I'm like, what? To him, that was a normal situation. If that happened to my dad's generation, they would have been fired right away. They never would have thought about it. They would have thought that person was absolutely insane, because
Mhm.
why would you ever think you could just walk into a VP's office while they're on their phone and just start talking to them, let alone berate them for something that they thought you did? There's just a lack of understanding of what is professional these days, because the definition of professionalism has massively changed. And we're not the ones who changed it. They are. And so, good or
Mm.
bad, it's changed. So when they come in, you have to set boundaries. And my wife will tell you that, it's kind to have boundaries. You have to have boundaries for yourself. But their boundaries are completely different. They're craving and seeking connection, even though they think they're hyper connected. And so it's this baffling, yin and yang, because they're trying to really desperately connect. And so sometimes they just need to know that I've said this earlier, they have a safe place to be. There's a great book by Daniel Coyle called The Culture Code. And it's an amazing book. He's an amazing author. But one of the biggest things, he interviewed all these groups of high performing teams, one of them being the Navy SEALs. And it was like, you have to feel safe with your people. If you don't feel safe, you'll never, exceed your expectations. You'll never grow. You'll never succeed. You'll never highly perform, because you won't trust one another if you don't feel safe. And trust is a massive component of that. So and we could talk about this for hours. I think there's opportunities for leaders like myself and others who hopefully are listening to look at their surroundings, look at the teams they have, look at their staff, and see how they might be able to adjust and better suit them, while still, you have to still follow the business need. There's a business need that you need to hit. You just might have to go a different way to get there with this new group of people. So you wanted to hit my book, which in the few remaining minutes, let's do that. We can probably
Before we jump into that swimming pool, let me just say this and see if you have a comment on it. I'm a better listener now than I was 20 years ago, I hope. And I've just really listened. I don't think it's semantics to say that, the word that I have used a lot in my leadership over the years in regards to my team and what I'm doing was alignment. It sounds like this word that you use, connection, where they want to connect, is it's not opposed to alignment. It almost sounds like though it is a doorway to alignment, or maybe it's inside, maybe it's almost the heart of alignment. I'm struggling to kind of describe it, but it sounds highly a desire for high authenticity, high transparency,
yeah.
um, um, and if we can't do that, everything else we're trying to do might just seem like noise. Am I hearing that right?
Absolutely. You can have alignment with people of your objectives and be of completely different, ilks of how you get there, or what you believe in, or, why you believe you should get there. But alignment is literally just, 2 points, literally being aligned in a direction. You can do that without being connected with people. So I think connection
Yeah.
is a completely different beast. I think you can be more aligned when you're connected. But if you're talking about like alignment with a Gen Zer versus what their true need is, and their true need is feeling trusted, that you empathize with them, that you offer them grace, that you're vulnerable with them, that you're transparent with them, that you reward them with recognition when it's deserved, like that to them is like meaningful connection. And if you want to tie this up
Engage.
in a bow, yeah,
Engage.
uh,
Yeah.
absolutely. But but here's the crazy thing. I was going to say, if you want to tie this whole conversation up in a bow, that's what a brand is. A brand you can trust, you rely on, you have an emotional connection with that business, product, or service. And so what I basically get to be, my job is the same no matter where I go. And that was a different, harder lesson to learn, is that it's basically the gospel, right? You're being authentic and transparent to earn favor with people that you want to be connected with, whether you're selling a product or you want to work with them. And that in my mind is everything about Jesus.
So with that, let's go ahead and talk about twice found.
Yeah, I'll hit this quickly. I'd encourage people to go, you can pick it up on Amazon. It will come from Amazon. It won't come from China. But it will come from Amazon. It's called Twice Found. It's basically, in a nutshell, it's a little bit of a memoir. Well, it's a lot of memoir, but it's also about how I found God twice, and I can't say he found me twice because he always was there. But it also kind of runs parallel with that was how I found my wife again. So my wife and I were engaged when we were in college. Her first year of school out in Colorado. I went to the University of Colorado. She went to a 1-year Bible school up in Estes Park, and we met because she tried to evangelize to me, and I told her I was on the same team. So, but let's go out instead. And we fell in love. We fell madly in love, and we got engaged. I asked her parents if I could marry her. I flew down to Florida for that, and it was a wonderful relationship. And in the days we're talking about, remote controls and clickers, this was before cell phones and email. Email was just coming online, but it was your school email only. And she went home. I was 3 weeks behind her on a different school schedule, and I said, I'm going to go back to Philly, drive home, drop off some stuff, drive down to Florida. We were going to plan our lives and get married that fall. And she drove off back to Florida, and I never saw her again. We didn't speak. We didn't have mutual friends. We didn't become social media friends 10, 12 years later when Facebook came out. She'd left, and I never saw her again. And I went through my first round of depression in my life was that summer where I couldn't find her. She comes from a very well-known Christian family, and so it was very difficult to get a hold of her the right way. She also comes from a large family, so it was very difficult to have if I could call, it wouldn't go through, whatever. I can't remember the circumstances anymore. We laugh at how we can't remember. I kind of blocked out a lot of it. And eventually we just both moved on. And I married somebody having a broken heart. She married her high school boyfriend with a broken heart. And we both lived inauthentic lives for 21 years. And I had gone through really my lowest point in life, which was, and I told you I'd walked away from the Lord at that point too, because I felt like this was my path. And I was so convinced that she was the one for me that I was like, I don't trust the Lord. I walked away from God completely. And so, long story short, 21 years later, I'm going through a massive divorce. I get fired from this high-powered executive job. I had a suicide attempt. I was just an absolute mess. And my ex-wife, to get me out of the house, she told me to just go take your bike someplace and ride and clear your head for a couple weeks. So I went to Maui, which is a very special place for me. I was living in Portland, so it was a quick little jump over there, and I spent 2 weeks just biking and hanging out, running every morning, but I went over there with in mind saying I'm going to be open to whatever's out there. And I remember very vividly, I was on an Alaskan Air flight. I was like in row 4 or something. And I remember I said, I don't know if it's God or Yahweh or Jehovah or Allah or Mother Nature or the universe. I don't know. I really don't know. But whatever's out there, whatever you think is for me, I'm going to say yes to. I'm going to be open because I'm tired of living my life selfishly. I'm just tired of hurting people. I'm tired of being a fraud. I'm tired of just being a dick. I'm just tired. It doesn't work. And I just made that promise to myself. And from the second I got off the plane, every single person I met brought up Jesus in one way or another. And it was remarkable. And it was it was usually weird. Like the sushi chef, I'd sit at the bar because I didn't want to take up a table because I was by myself. And so they served me my sushi, and guy goes, oh, you waiting for somebody? I'm like, no, I'm by myself. He's like, oh, you here for work? I'm like, no. He's like, who comes to Maui by themselves? I'm like, well, I'm going through a hard time. And he's like, well, listen, not to be weird, but you want to get a beer afterwards if you don't know anybody? And I'm like, I would say no normally. I'm like, I don't know you. Like, no, And I went,
that's weird.
Okay, And so every opportunity, and I had this brand new Jeep that was a rental at one point, and it broke down, like 6 miles on it. It broke down. And I remember it was the middle of the night, and it was like 10 p.m. Everything shuts down in Kihei, this little town in Maui. And I walked over to this place, and I said, hey, do you guys have jumper? Are you locals? Do you have jumper cables? And the girl goes, I do, but I'm going to go meet my boyfriend and some friends over. Do you want to come with me first? And I'm like, no, but yes. So I go over, and they're all believers, and they're all just like, how can we help you, man? Like, we played pool together, had a couple beers, and they're just like, hey, do you want to come to our Bible study? It was crazy. And the very last night before I got on that plane, I'm watching TV, and I look up at the screen, and I heard this voice that I'll never forget. It was ingrained in my memory, and I knew it was this woman. And I looked up on the screen, and it was my now wife, and I hadn't seen her in 21 years.
Wow.
And I just wrote to her I found her on Facebook. I had she had kept her married last name, and so I wrote her right away, and I said, I don't know if you remember me,
Wow.
but I might cry right now, and I apologize for your listeners, but I'm going through a really, really hard time. And I just want to let you know that seeing you made me realize that I'm not alone. And she wrote back, and she said something to the effect of, not remember you, I'm insulted. We were going to get married. And by the way, I've been looking for you for 20 years. And we fell in love very quickly again. We knew each other. I mean, we'd been pining for each other for years. And we fell in love as adults. It was very beautiful but strange, because it was like I knew her, but I was just getting to catch up on her. It was very weird, but in a really beautiful way. And yeah, we fell in love. We blended our families, and it was really amazing. And at our wedding, I said to her in our vows, I said, if I was God and I wanted to convince Kyle that I was real, I would send you to him. And that's what I believe he did. So that story is woven through Twice Found. It's not necessarily the backbone of it, but it's part of it. And it's really how all these different men in my life, from the time I was 6 years old up until now, all these different men have played vital roles in my life and shown me remarkable ways of the character of Jesus, either through humility or kindness or acceptance or grace or love or gratitude, or, I mean, every single. So if you read a chapter, it's a chapter about this amazing man in my life who showed me something I never knew of, whether they were a believer or not. And if you read it all together, it's the story of this kid who was lost his entire life until he found the Lord again. So that's it.
Kyle, we can get your book on Amazon, but how do we look you up if we are interested in your business and what you provide? But how do we do that?
Yeah, you can find me at on LinkedIn easily, Kyle Duford. There's only one other one out there, and he's a young kid in Canada who sometimes I write messages to saying stop stealing my underwear. He doesn't find that funny. But you find me on LinkedIn, and you can find us at brandleader.com. And if you're interested in the book, a quick link will take you there called comingbacktogod.com. Will take you directly there, or just search for my name on Amazon, and you'll find Amazon, Barnes & Noble, I think Target, a couple other places. If you just search for Twice Found Kyle Duford, it should pop right up. And there's more to that story than I just told you. So hopefully it's a good read for people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that you went over time. Thank you for that. That last part was too valuable for you to leave out. Thank you for joining us, Kyle. We'll make sure we put all that in the show notes to give another entry into learning about your book and your business.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This has been an absolute pleasure, and I appreciate you having me on the show.
If you're not part of the Lead Today community, let me invite you. Go to leadtodaycommunity.com. That's leadtodaycommunity.com and sign up for Monday Moments. It's a weekly email that will encourage your leadership. Again, thank you for joining us today, and thank you for telling a friend about the Today Counts show.